Welcome back to Introduction to XPages Development, a video blog series at pauldn.com. Part 6, Demonstration of Advanced Techniques Using XPages. This blog series is based on Introduction to XPages Development, a free course available from tlcc.com. In this Part 6 in the series, I'll be running the demonstrations in Module 3, providing some comments and a high-level overview of the design of some of these advanced techniques. Before we run our first advanced demonstration, let's review in Designer the structure for these demonstrations, where the various components are. Early on in Part 2 in this series, we created design.nsf, a new database, and we created all of our XPages and our XPages related resources within design.nsf. We pointed to various data sources, like a Domino view data source in our customer's application, and a Domino document data source in the customer's application as well for these XPages. Now, we're going to put away design.nsf, and these advanced demonstrations all exist in this Workbench NSF database, which was installed when you installed the course. And we can see in the XPages design list several demo XPages, and we're going to be running these demos and taking a look at the design, at least at a high level, the design of these databases. Now, for most of these demonstrations, they will continue to use data sources within the customer's application and the parts and sales, so we again see that clear separation of data or data sources and the design components, and that gives a huge advantage. So when we create within our central design database some code libraries like a server-side JavaScript library or a client-side JavaScript library or a Java class or a Java bean or a managed bean, or a jar, a container of those classes, then all of those will be available to all of our applications, and we can use those when we're working with an application that's related to the parts, the golf clubs that we sell at Big Oak, or our customers, or the sales orders, and so on. Here in Notes, we see the databases that were installed with the course. So we see the customers and the parts and the sales database, sales NSF databases. So these are going to be our data sources. Design.nsf, which we created earlier. We're going to be working with the XPages, the demonstrations in the Workbench database, and it will use as data sources the customer's parts and sales application. So going into the lessons database, in Module 3, our first advanced technique is filtering a view control. So I'll open up that lesson, and we can see an image of what we're doing here, filtering by S and seeing all of our customers that begin with S. And there is a demonstration box to start the HTTP task. Mine is already running, so I'll just jump to this one here to open the demo XPage 711 in a browser. And I can see that here opened in my browser. And I'll scroll down a bit. And if I filter by S and select this button to filter that, I see all of my customers that begin with S. Let's try an SP and do some further filtering. And there's also this clear filter, and when I do that, it returns my view panel showing all of my customers. So how is that done in Designer? Let's have a look. So that was the 711. We also have in the design list an ability to filter our design list. So I can see in my XPages design list, when I enter in E7, I see all of my XPages that have an E7 in it. So that was the 711 XPage. And we're not going to recreate this. We're just going to take a look at a high level at what provided that filtering. So first off, for input text control is an edit box control called filter value. But what's important is on the data tab that this was bound to a scoped variable, a session scope variable called filter value. So whatever we put into this edit box control is going to be assigned to that session scoped filter value variable. Now what we also see is that for our view panel control, we get our properties for our view panel control, and on the data tab, where I can see that it was bound to another application, that's the customer's application, specifically the customer by name view, so that's our Domino view data source for our view panel control. And it has this property, filter by column values, which is computed, and if I look at this formula, I see that the formula for that filter by column value is sessionscope.filterValue. So as I assign things, as I enter things into that edit box control, then this particular property is being assigned and filtering the values within my Domino view data source. If I take a look at the all properties for my view panel control, and if I expand this data, I see I have a Domino view data source for my view panel control, and it's actually this keys property that's being assigned session scope filter value to filter. But I can also see in my data properties, I can also see that there is a category filter. So if I wanted to filter by category for a categorized view, I would use the category filter property for that particular data source. And scrolling down, I can see there is a search property as well. So that's for filtering using a full text search. So all of those filtering capabilities that you're used to in your traditional Domino view design are also available when you use a Domino view data source for a particular component on your XPage, like a view panel control. So looking at some other things, we have this filter view button, which we push to filter the values. And when we take a look at the events, the on-click event is not coded to do anything. There's no real simple actions. It's just the simple action route. There's nothing in the script editor. It's not doing anything. Well, it's doing one thing. It is doing a partial update. So there are some server options that you can set for your server-side events. And a partial update says I want to partially update just this component on the XPage and anything within this component. Panel 1 is a panel component, a container component, so anything within that, which is this table with this edit box control filter value, and further down in here we have the view panel. So anything contained in that will be updated when the user pushes this button. For the clear filter button, what it's doing is it's taking the session scope variable, session scope.filterValue, and setting that to null, and that's how it's filtering that. It's also doing a partial update on panel 1 and anything contained in panel 1, including our view panel control. Okay, continuing on with the next technique, combining a Domino view and a document on an XPage. I'll open that lesson. I see a visual representation of a Domino view and a view panel control, and a document here in this panel control, all in the same XPage. I'm going to launch this. This is Demo XPage 721. And as I select these various links, I'm not opening up another XPage. I remain on Demo XPage 721, but I'm seeing in this panel control on the right the information about the various customers that I'm clicking on. So here's some information for Columbus Golf and Country, and if I want, I can even edit this information. Maybe change that address to 654. Maybe change the, well, I can't change the name, and that makes a lot of sense actually, but we can go ahead and submit that. Okay, so I can change that address. Okay, so let's take a look at how that was done in Designer. And here I see Demo XPage 721 in Designer, and I see a view panel control on the left and a panel control with various input controls that are bound to fields like the address field in the document 1 data source and the city field in the document 1 data source. And what I also see is when I select my XPage in my outline control and go to its properties, I can see on the Data tab there are 2 data sources added to this XPage. So very unique when you compare that to traditional notes or Domino design, where you can have 2 data sources on a single design element on a single XPage. So we have our customer by name data source, which I can see the details. It's a Domino view data source into our customer's application, specifically the customer by name view within that application. And we also have a document 1 data source also for the customer's application. The customer form within that customer's application is providing the schema, what fields are available within that data source. I can also see that on the Data tab as well. So I can see all of the fields available within that document 1 data source, like the address and city and state and so on. Also, if I expand this a little bit more, I can see that for this data source, this property was computed, the document ID property. Now, traditionally, we didn't have to compute this within the application that we built in parts 2 and 3 and 4, but we can see it's computed here. And if I take a look at its computation, I see again a scoped variable, session scope doc unique ID. So somewhere I am setting to my session scope variable the unique identity identifier, the document unique ID, for the various customer documents that the user is clicking on. So let's take a look at where that's being set. And if I select this customer column, and if I take a look at its events, I can see its on-click event. That's where I'm actually setting that session scope variable, session scope.doc unique ID, and let me take a look at the full formula here, is equal to current entry, which is a variable that I've set up for each entry within my Domino view data source. Okay, so for the current entry, returning its universal ID. Okay, and that's basically the mechanics for that technique. The next technique is to join data from multiple views. And let's take a look at the views that we're going to be joining. So there is a button to open the sales rep view in the customer's application. And here's one of the views, and it has 3 columns: region, sales representative, and quota. And what we would like to do is also, for each of those sales reps, want to show their customers. And there's a customers by sales rep view, which has in the first categorized column the sales representative name, and in the second column the customers for that sales rep. So those are the 2 views that we want to join. And when we launch this demo XPage 733 XPage in a browser, that's what we see. Okay, so from our sales rep view, we see the region, sales rep, and their quota, and we see the customers for each of those sales reps. So let's see how that was done in Designer. And here we see our demo XPage 733 XPage, and we have a view panel control, which is bound to the sales rep view in our customers application. And for the first column, the region column, it's bound to the region column within that sales rep view data source, Domino view data source, and this is bound to the representative, and this is bound to the quota column, all within that same Domino view data source. And of course, this is the interesting column, the customers, and we see that it's not bound to a view column. Its values are computed, and let me see that in Editor. And basically, for the view entry, we're returning the value of the sales representative to this variable, sales rep, and then we're going to pass that in a DB lookup. Okay, so we're doing a DB lookup to the customer by sales rep view and returning column 2, and that's how we're doing it. And that certainly is quite unique. You don't do that in your regular Domino view design, where you can, within the column of a view, yes, you can compute the values, but you cannot perform a DB lookup into another view. And of course, this was within the same database, but it could have been another database as well. The next technique is including charting in your XPages. And we can see the kind of chart we're going to see in the demo. And I'm going to push this button to open Demo XPage 361 in a browser. And I can see this chart here, and I can see these little tooltip pop-ups showing me the total sales for regions. On the right here, I also have a view panel control. This is for a categorized view, sales by region. I can expand these to see all of the orders for that particular region. And I can see in this column here the actual total for each one of the regions, and that's reflected, in this tooltip pop-up as well. So that is certainly quite cool. Now we're turning to the lesson, and there's a second button to open that same XPage in Notes, and that's cool. So we've got the same functionality, when I view this in the Notes client, so XPages in the Notes client, also referred to as XPink, I see the exact same functionality. So I'm seeing native charting also available within the Notes client. Let's see how that was done. And here in Designer, I see Demo XPage 361, and I've expanded in the outline my XPage, and I can see quite a number of Dojo module resources in my XPages resources. And these are available natively in Notes, Notes Domino 8.5, 9. In fact, back to release 6.5, the Dojo Toolkit has been available natively to Notes and Domino. So available for your use, you just need to use it. And for this technique, the main moving parts are a computed field, which basically builds a navigator to that view and builds from there an array of the order totals for each of the regions. And we have a panel control called Simple Chart. And this is just an empty container panel. There's no code in here, nothing in here. All of the work, the real work, is done here in this output script control. And if I go to the values property for this output script control, I see this client-side JavaScript. And I see things like building a new chart, a new 2D chart. So I needed to add that module. We'll take a look at those modules in a moment. And it's assigning that to something with an ID called Simple Chart. That's that panel that we looked at earlier. Okay, so it's going to render my pie chart. So we see some properties that are being set, which fonts to use, put the label offset at -30 or 30 pixels outside of the chart, and so on. As we go through here, there's a returning of the value of that computed field 1 where we built the array of all of our sales by region. So returning that and then building a new array from that. And then for each value in that array, each total for the various regions, for the East region, for the North region, assigning that. And then finally, rendering or plotting the chart at the end. So main work is done in that output script control. And just looking at the XPage properties under resources, I can see quite a number of Dojo modules that are being added here. Dojo currency to format those numbers in a currency format, and these Dojo X charting modules, for 2D charts and to move the slice to provide that animation, and so on. The next mobile technique that we're going to take a look at really does highlight one of the most exciting areas of XPages development, and that is developing XPages for mobile devices. And we see some screen captures of the application that we're going to take a look at. Now, first I'm going to launch this application in a browser, and that's what I'm seeing here. Still in a browser, I'm seeing this same application in a simulator, simulating an iPhone device, both in landscape and portrait mode, Android device using the Android themes in portrait and landscape mode a little further down. And we also have the BlackBerry device. So really just featuring the themes, but this is fully functional. So I can select one of these customers like the Atlantic City Golf customer, and I'm seeing information about that customer. So this is the same 2-page application that we converted, that we developed as an XPage application in parts 2 to 5 in this series. But there's also a third page here to view a map from the current location, and I'm located in Hamilton, Ontario, to the actual customer golf course location in New Jersey. And if I try this for another customer, like this Columbus Golf and Country, and view a map from my current location here in Hamilton, Ontario, to their location in Columbus, Ohio. So, and this is a fully functional Google map that's been added to this particular application. So let's have a look at how that was done. And here in Designer, this was developed on the Mobile Demo 654 XPage. So that complete application was developed on a single XPage, and it was developed using these controls, these mobile controls. The first control that was added was a single page application control, and into that you add an application page for each mobile application page. So I can see in the outline, I've got a single page application control, and into that I've got the first page where I'm showing that customer by name view, and in the second page showing information about the customer, like their address and their city and state and phone number, and on the third page that mapping information provided by Google Maps. If I look at the XPage resources, I see that we're using this JavaScript library, Google Maps, for that mapping functionality. But this certainly shows us a couple of things. One is these are built-in controls that are available to you right within your native Notes 9 environment. They are hands down the easiest way to develop a mobile application. And from a personal point of view, this is a great skill that you really do want to add to your skills toolbox. So I do encourage you to take a look at these controls. We have a course that's devoted to this, our Mobile XPages development course. So you might want to check that out as well as a great way to get it up to speed quickly in this very exciting development area. A version of this mobile customers demonstration is available from our website. So enter into your device's browser, tlcc.com/demo, and then select Customer App. And then you can select one of the customers from the customer by name view, like the Columbus Golf and Country customer. Now these are fictitious customers, all of these, and these are fictitious emails and phone numbers, but you can try out the integration of the mobile controls with the device's capabilities by testing out sending an email and see that it puts a fictitious email address into your email, or clicking on the phone link to dial a phone number. But once again, not a real phone number, so you might want to cancel that. The addresses, on the other hand, are in fact valid addresses to real places. So that's a real address in Columbus, Ohio. So when you click on View Map, you'll actually see a marker for that particular address within Columbus, Ohio. So you can check out the geolocation capabilities of the device. We'll come back to the form table in a moment. Let's skip ahead to this advanced technique using dialogues and tooltip dialog controls. And I'll launch this Demo XPage 454 demonstration. And here it is. And we can see our customers and some information. And we can edit this Arnold's Golf by clicking this Edit Dialog 1. And I see a dialog control. This is a modal control, but I can certainly go in here and change this information, and I'll just put in some letters so that I can see that change right on my screen, and there it is. And with a tooltip dialog, a couple of different things here. One is this is non-modal, so I can click somewhere else to remove that tooltip dialog. And also there's an indication of what this dialog is for. So this little up arrow is indicating this is for this particular entry. So I can, once again, edit this information, and I'll just change the phone number that way, and I can visibly see that change here. So let's take a look at these components in Designer. And here in Designer, we see our Demo XPage 454 XPage. And I can see these links for opening things. This link is called Edit Dialog 1. If I take a look at the events, This is using the XSP open dialog command to open something called dialog 1, and this one here is using the XSP open tooltip dialog to open something called tooltip dialog 1. And these two controls, let me select them, are on my X page, and they'll be dormant, not visible, until they're called when someone clicks on one of those links to XSP open dialog 1 or XSP open tooltip dialog 1. So this is our dialog control, and we see our, actually that's our tooltip dialog control, and we see its ID is tooltip dialog 1 and our dialog control with its ID as dialog 1. And these are in our extension library area, and you'll find a dialog control. There's also a dialog button bar control and dialog content, so a container control where you can add content into your dialog. And further down here, we see the tooltip dialog control. Okay, I'm going to wrap up this part in our series with a look at the framework controls, the form table control for displaying Domino documents, the data view framework control for displaying Domino views, and also the application layout control for designing a common application layout for all of the XPages within an NSF application or across a suite of applications. All of these framework controls use the IBM One UI themes, specifically One UI version 2.1 or later, and they all work very nicely together, and you'll see that visual appeal that they bring to an application when they're used together. So in this first demonstration, we're going to take a look at the form table control, and we'll also feature the Dojo validation text box control. Run this demonstration. And here I see a form table control with 4 layout rows, one single layout column. So you can have multiple layout columns when you have many fields. Probably you have a lot of forms with more than 3 fields. So I'm going to simply tab into this first name field, and I see a little pop-up, a little tooltip pop-up saying your first name is required. I'm going to ignore that and tab to the next field. And now I'm seeing it back in that first name input field, an indication that I've missed something, that little triangle warning symbol indicating I've missed that. Well, for now, I'm just going to enter my last name. There we go, a little better. Now, let me tab to the next field. Once again, a little pop-up indicating that this particular field, the input, is optional. And I'm going to go ahead and submit that. And I have a descriptive information indicating that, yes, this value is required. So I also have focus there. So I'm going to enter in my name. And this time I will be allowed to submit this. Okay, and here is the document that was just created. Okay, so I can see how it displays in read mode as well. Now, the next demonstration, we're going to take a look at the data view control. And we're also going to take a look at the in-place form control, which is a control for editing right in place within a view control. So we're going to provide some in-view editing. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so I'll run this demo XPage 545 demonstration, and I can see a couple of things. One, I can see that there are quite a few pager type controls. So I can hide all the details, I can show all the details, I can individually show the details for a particular view entry just by clicking on this little gizmo on the right. That's called chevrons. And we have some in-place editing capabilities as well. So I can click here, and I'm seeing an in-place form. An in-place form is a form that pops up in place. It's hidden until it's called. And at this point, I can attempt to change some things like the phone number and save that. And I'm seeing that change reflected right here. So that is your data view control. Really nice control for displaying your Domino views. Has this interesting details area, which is kind of like a built-in repeat right in your view control. So that's kind of cool. So we'll come back to that again in another blog series that I'm planning. And finally, the application layout framework. And the application layout control, you define this once on a custom control, and then all of your XPages will use it, and they get that common application layout across all of the XPages within a specific application, or in this example, I'm going to show you across a suite of applications, the customers, sales, and the parts applications. So let's take a look at this demonstration. And here we're seeing one of the views available, the customer by region view, and I'm seeing the customer documents displayed in this view in a data view control, and I can use some of these pagers to expand or collapse. Okay, if I open these documents, I'm seeing they're displayed in a form table control. This form table has 3 columns, so it's been set up that way. Certainly there's more information here. Once again, these look good together. And your form table control works very nicely with your data view control and your overall application layout control. This application layout control is using title bar tabs to switch to the different applications. So to access the sales application and the information within the sales NSF database, I'll go to that tab, or the parts application, and I see a listing of the parts. I can select the different views. This one is categorized at 2 levels, and when I open up one of these, I can see the details for that, once again using a form table control to display the details. That concludes this part of our Intro to XPages development series. In this part, I demonstrated several advanced techniques here in Module 3. In the next part, I'm going to focus on skills and what skills you need to develop great applications for notes clients and web browsers and for even mobile devices. So until then, so long for now.